Welcome to another self-growth video. Today I would like to speak about, firstly, how bad habits, or any habits, don't really ever leave you. They're always back there, and you could for years not have done the habit, but if the cue or the trigger gets triggered, it'll a lot of times cause you to do the habit. And secondly, I'd like to speak about why the unnatural, something that's unnatural or exaggerated, is more tempting than the natural. Okay, but first, if you enjoy these videos, please like and subscribe and help us grow this channel. So let's start. So firstly, we have to understand that habits don't really ever leave you. Basically, when you created a habit, you created a path, a neural path in your brain, and you can't really erase it. So the question is, so if you have a bad habit, so for good habits this is good, because that means, let's say you did a lot of not the best stuff, or whatever the case is, or you went down a bad path, but earlier on you were a good person, then you could channel back into this early on stage and go back into the old system. Although I don't know if you'd want to do it, because it could be the fact that you're not doing good means even when you were doing good before there's problems, but of course you could channel into part of it, or whatever the case is. But what most would bother people is that bad habits, or any bad thing that happens, it doesn't really completely ever go away. So how do you resist the urge or temptation of going back to the old ways, or to bad habits and all of that? So the way a lot of people say, you have to be very strong, you have to have a strong heart, strong mind, and resist temptation. And that's nice, and maybe some people could do that. But and you see the Rambam also mentions this. He says, how do we know that someone, he's a real Baal Tshuva, when he did Avera with a woman, and then years later after he did Tshuva, he's back with that woman, the same city, the same, he loves her just as much, and he refrains from doing the Avera. That is a true Baal Tshuva. Now, why the same city? Why the same woman? And in the same love and all of that? That's because the environment, we spoke about this before, is the environment becomes a trigger or whatever. So the city, that's one trigger. So basically everything that happened, now if it was this woman in a different city, it might not have been as triggering. So it's not a full proof that he was a full Baal Tshuva like he is if everything is exactly the same, because that was when the trigger happens. That's when this desire happened, which means that would be the biggest chance it would happen again. But anyhow, so how do you do this? The thing is, are you always going to just resist temptation? That's impossible. You're tired one day, you're finished, it's very hard to do. So the answer is no, that's not what you want to do. You want to arrange your environment in a way that you won't have to worry all the time about resisting temptation. That you will be ready, so you'll have a good life in general in this way, and not always fighting against temptation, and that you'll be ready for that when there is temptation, you'll be able to fight against it. Now, I think this is what the Rambam means also. The Rambam doesn't mean you should go, and I think this is very obvious this is the case. The Rambam doesn't mean you should go there and be in that situation and then try resisting temptation. No, it means if it happens to be that this is what happens and you resist temptation, that's a proof that you're a complete Baal Tshuva, that you did Tshuva, but not that you should stay in the same environment. But the idea is you're supposed to change environment radically. Well, I mean, depends on the situation and all of that, but change your environment completely. See, and it's very important, you have to write down what the cues are, what triggers you, what causes you to do a certain action. Figure it out. And then instead of smashing yourself on the head with a hammer and rebuking yourself and getting all upset with yourself, figure out how to refrain from getting into the situation where the trigger will come into effect. That's what's very important. And then when you have a real temptation that comes along, it'll be easier for you to use your willpower to overcome it, because you didn't exhaust your willpower every other second fighting temptation. That's important. One of the things I want to speak about, not too long. Now, the second thing I want to speak about is why the unnatural is more tempting than the natural. Now, it's very obvious. You speak about candies, treats, all these things like that, videos, social media, everything. All of these things are unnatural, are exaggerated natural things, because social media is an exaggeration of being social, and treats is an exaggeration of good food, and video, right? It goes on. There's so many examples of this, and like companies work so hard on figuring out all the the components that will cause a person to just go crazy over something, and that's exactly what happens when we come to exaggerations or unnatural things. Is a person goes crazy over them. So now we have to understand, and this is partially, I would say, the Atomic Habits speaks about it. Some of this I'm inputting, but we have to understand, why did Hashem create us that way? Isn't this a disadvantage that we have? Now we're going to be running after all these desires because they're like exaggerated. So the answer is that I would say it's very obvious that Hashem created it because so people will be able to stock up and save up, let's say on food, for example. They'll be able to, in the olden days, when you barely had food, sometimes you had to hunt, sometimes you didn't have food for weeks, or whatever the case is. There's famine so much more often, so you'd be able to see the best and see when something's, when there's food, and take advantage of it, learn how to save it and all of that. And it goes on with everything else. You go on with and naturally, really, Hashem made us in a way to desire the best, and it's for a good reason, so we could continue and all of that in the best manner, instead of, falling down and, becoming the worst of us, rather become the best of us. But it causes a lot of problems also, of course, but the good is greater than the bad, and that's the point over here. But nowadays, that we have so many people realized the buttons, or whatever you call it, that cause us to go to just go crazy or wild over something, over food, over whatever it is. So we see it's causing a lot of problems: diabetes, overeating, all these. So many sicknesses is because of food, and all these different examples. But we see that this is the situation So one of the examples that Atomic Habits brings is, I forgot what bird it was, but a certain bird that they have a red dot on their beak. And so someone decided to check out to see what happens if he takes a cardboard beak, puts a red dot. So basically these birds, the way they would get food from their mother is peck the red dot. So he put a cardboard, and they pecked that red dot, even though it didn't look alike. So decided to put 3 red dots, and they pecked the. They went crazy over pecking it, like it really excited them. So that's an exaggeration of reality. Now, another exaggeration by geese. Another exaggeration is by geese. Let's say, so if their egg rolls down towards the river or whatever, so they'll run to pull it back up with their neck, and they have cases that the bigger the object is, the more they fight to pull it back up. Like they have recorded situations when a goose was trying to pull up a volleyball. So it's very and harder than they would even a normal egg. It's an exaggeration of reality. So the reason we have to understand this is, first of all, to understand why this wasn't like this in the olden days as much, and now we're having just like so many problems: addiction and this, addiction and that, addiction to social media, addiction to your phone, addiction, overeating. All of those things come from this problem. Exactly the problem that people have figured out how to cause themselves to go to release more dopamine or whatever it is, and anyhow, that's very important. And we have to understand this because we understand how bad habits could happen, especially when it comes to exaggerations. And we're gonna try, and I hope I'll be able to in a different video speak about this, about how we'll be able to use this how you could use this for your benefit. Over exaggerate a habit in certain ways. Figure out how hopefully I'll speak about it more, how to over exaggerate habits that you want, that are good, that you want to have, and how to use this for your advantage. Anyhow, that's about it for today. Now again, if you enjoy these videos, please like and subscribe and comment if you have anything interesting to say. Have a good day.